fundamentally, Professor Clausen and I view our mission as bringing together your academic experience, your experience as students, which is broader than just the classroom, and your existence in a community that has lots of faculty and scholars. And so trying to find points of intersection where you are really excited and engaged because the conversations are scintillating, and where it sparks knowledge and thought processes, and you begin to see with greater clarity what your future might become. And so it was with that in mind that we invited Vice Provost Archie Holmes to come be with us today. He is the Vice Provost of Educational Innovation and Interdisciplinary Studies. He's going to tell you a lot more about that. He is a professor in the electrical engineering and computer engineering department. And so for those of you who are science leaning or truly vested in engineering, I think his story will resonate with you. But it is a multifaceted road that he has taken to this particular point. The things that he will not tell you are that he is—
This is the danger. Somebody that you know introduce you.
He is an extraordinarily accomplished scholar with technical articles in the numbers of over 100 and multiple, tens of presentations. I think probably over 70 presentations and such. So clearly, he's a true scholar. I met Archie about 4 years ago, and our paths do not cross that often. But what I will tell you is that when I watch him up close and at a distance, there is a level of grace and dignity and engagement and persistence, and there is a respect that he commands wherever he goes, and he is still very authentic and accessible. And it's really for those reasons that we invited you here today. Please join me in welcoming Vice Provost.
So I should honestly stop there because I don't know that it's going to get any better than that. Thank you, Melissa. So what I've decided to title this talk is what does a vice provost do anyway? Because if you were like me when you were an undergraduate student, none of those words of vice or well, maybe vice would mean something to you, but provost certainly probably didn't mean much to you. And so I think I would tell you a little bit about that. And also I couldn't help but put some pieces of advice about my particular journey to this point along the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in two basic stages. I'm going to talk about my journey to becoming the Vice Provost for Educational Innovation and Interdisciplinary Studies, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit about what I do in this role. But to help me, I need a little bit of help from you. So there's some framing questions that I'd like to have some idea about. So at this point in your career, I know most of you have been here first years. Do you have a sense of what your faculty do when they're not in front of you in the classroom? How many of you feel you have a pretty good idea about that?
My dad teaches.
Okay, so you have insider knowledge, but most of you don't. So I'm going to talk a little bit about when you don't see your professors, what it is that we spend our time doing. Do you know how the university is organized? And I don't mean in terms of schools and departments and all that, in terms of the management structure. Do you have a sense of that? And more importantly, how much do you actually want to know about how the university is structured and organized, which actually might be the more important question. So what do you think? Do you want me to talk some about that particular aspect? Okay, see a few nods. And I suspect I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How many of you know what a provost is or what a provost actually does? All right. Okay, good. So I'll spend a lot of time actually talking about that one. Because of course, that's the person that I work for. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about my personal journey of how I ended up at this particular spot. And I'm going to start in the early years, go back in time. So I moved around a lot as a kid. Maybe a lot of you did this. I consider Austin, Texas home. Technically, for those of you who know about Central Texas, there's a town, Round Rock, which is about 20 miles north. How do you know about Round Rock?
I live in Houston, and I have a friend going to college around Round Rock.
Okay, excellent. So I grew up in Round Rock, so it's about 25 miles north of Austin, and that's what I consider home. I did move around a fair amount. I was born in Chicago, so I'm a Chicago Bears fan, or I'm a fan of some team in the Midwest when they're not doing well. And these are the other places I've lived. So I lived in Minnesota, I lived in Newtown, Connecticut for a brief period, and then in Round Rock, Texas. Okay. I was convinced when I was younger that I was going to be the next Michael Jordan. That was the thing that dominated my life in high school, okay? And there were two problems with this. One is that I'm not 6'6" and have a significant amount of athletic ability. I'm not bad, but I'm not great. And the other one, that's actually probably the main one. Yeah, that's probably it. That's probably actually it. At the end of the day, I probably have the desire, but not the means, okay? But academically, I was really focused on math and science, and I could not stand English. I mean, English was probably about as awful a subject as I could imagine at that time in my life. I remember taking the AP English test and getting a grade which meant I did not have to take any English in college. So we don't allow you to do that here at UVA, but I could do that in engineering. And I ran into my AP English class and I waved that test in front of my teacher and I said, I never have to take English again. I could not have been happier. All right, my comeuppance, as you are probably expecting, is coming a little later. So let's go ahead and go to the college years. So I went to the hometown institution. I went to the University of Texas at Austin to study electrical engineering. Those of you who know about engineering curriculums, they're very rigorous, and so there wasn't a lot of time for electives. And my goal was to graduate as fast as humanly possible and to get a job in industry, right? I was driven by the fact that I wanted a car. And the only way I was going to be able to get a car was to have money. And the only way I was going to have money was to graduate and to get a job. And so that was my singular focus starting college, right? A lot of people have that. But then a funny thing happened on the way to that dream. I took philosophy in my first semester, and it really did change my life. The class that I took was contemporary moral problems. What's interesting about that is the moral problems that we talked about that were contemporary were stuff that we still deal with today, whether it was abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, all those sorts of things were the things that we talked about. This was 1986, just to give you an idea of the same challenges. And this is where I got to study, Kant and Mills. And my favorite philosopher, I am actually an engineer who has a favorite philosopher, and it's John Rawls. And so I studied all these people, and it really did change my mind that there was a world out there that I hadn't really given enough credit to and that I was interested in pursuing. So as I continued in my college years, I actually chose to take a lot of additional courses, even English courses. All right, so I took a course, one of my favorites was in argumentative writing. I actually took 3 other English courses. Keep in mind, I had placed out of all the English I had to take for my degree. So these were all elective choices on my part to take this. My comeuppance was that because I lived close to home, I would go back every year and give the speech in my AP English teacher's class about how, even though I didn't think English was the world's greatest thing, you can figure out that something about it that you will enjoy. We had lots of different classes. I even went maybe a little too far. I took a creative writing poetry class one semester. It was a lot of fun, but not really my thing. Okay. And there's 2 pieces of advice that I would really put out to you as you think about your 4 years here on grounds. Right? The first is to be willing to admit that you might be wrong about your path going forward. And I'll show you the other part of where I was wrong about my path going forward in just a second. And this was one, that I would actually enjoy these courses. All I wanted to do was take math and science when I started, and I found out that there was a whole world out there that I hadn't given enough credit to that I could do. Okay? The other aspect is keep in mind that there are so many options that are available to you to explore academically, and I really trust you to get out of your comfort zone. That's what the creative writing poetry was for me. Right? I didn't know the single thing about writing poetry. All I knew is that things were supposed to rhyme. That was pretty much my limit of my knowledge of poetry. But it did get me out of my comfort zone, and you'll surprise yourself about the things that you will learn about yourself if you do that. Okay, so as we continue to the college years, the other thing that changed my life is I really got to know one of my professors out of the class really well. And she was the one who pointed out the fact that, maybe you should go to graduate school. And again, remember, I went to college to buy a car. Okay, and so she's now talking about delaying the time that I can buy a car. She probably will not like the fact that I've done this, but that is who she is. Her name is Christine Maziar. She was at Texas at the time. She's now in the Provost office at Notre Dame. And so what I will tell you about my experiences with Chris is it's really important that you get to know your professors more than the people people that you took classes with, right? We used to have all these great conversations. And for me, the most important I asked Chris was, I asked her two very important questions that changed me, right? The first is I asked her what she really did as a professor, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then she told me that, and then I asked her, well, how do I get a job like that? And then that's when she suggested graduate school, and that is really what put me on this particular path that I've been on for a while. Okay, so then the short answer is then, to speed forward, I went to Santa Barbara, California, UC system to study for graduate school. I'll talk a little bit about my research as we go forward, but I'm in the area of electronic materials. I went back to my alma mater in 1997 and took a faculty position, and I was there for just about 10 years, and then came here to UVA in 2007. So I've been here for, I guess, just about 7 years or so. Okay. So that's kind of how I got to the university and how I got to be a faculty member. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what our life is like as a faculty member, and this is the part outside of the classroom. Okay. And so what I really enjoy about this job is it's very varied. Okay. So at research universities, and this is tenure-track faculty, so these are faculty who are brought in to do 3 different aspects, and they usually put them down into these 3 main categories. So teaching, of course, that's where you interact with the faculty most of all. We spend our time doing research and scholarship, so Melissa talked about the articles that I have written, that our group has written, and in presentations, that's in that aspect. And then there's also the service aspect, okay? What is probably little known is that the faculty actually do a lot to run a university. So in terms of the way that your classes are structured, in the words of what's in what degree plan, that is a lot of what the faculty spends their time doing. And so that's what I mean by this internal service component, okay? It can be a wide variety of different things. There's also external. So for example, we have professional societies where there are meetings and presentations. Again, the people that are parts of those societies are the ones that are doing the work, and you get a chance to be, you get a chance to have access to those things, right? So the faculty generally are spending their time around these 3 things, okay? And what's nice about this is that these are, especially these other things, don't really have a clock, right? So when I decided to become a professor, and my friends who didn't know what I would do were always thinking about, wow, it's great, you get to have summers off. No, I don't get to have summers off because I'm really, really focused on these aspects of the job, right? So it is a 12-month job, which I really enjoy. One of the other things that you need to keep in mind, especially at a place like UVA, is the relative weights of these things vary, but we are at a research university, okay? And so one of the nice things about that is that the faculty are at the forefront of the knowledge in their fields, they are generating it, and so there is a weighting system, and it's really important that you kind of maybe understand that at least a little bit. Research and scholarship is really a lot of what's really important in terms of the faculty's long-term career. I think here at UVA, and one of the reasons that I'm here, is that teaching is pretty close. We really do value the fact that we're going to put our faculty into the classroom and interacting with you as first years and as undergraduate students. It's a really important part of our ethos. And then there's this service part, which at almost every institution I've ever talked about is not as highly valued by everybody, but it's unbelievably important in terms of the way the institution works. Okay, so this kind of gives you an idea. And so when you're not seeing their faculty, they're spending their time somewhere in those particular cases. So what happened to, so let me talk about my research then. Sorry, I can't remember what I put in here. So as I said, I work on optoelectronic devices, okay? And what you see here is the electromagnetic spectrum going all the way on this side from sound waves all the way up to X-rays here, okay? And just to give you a scale, this gives you an idea of the wavelength of these things. So we're talking about anything from about a football field to areas of subatomic particles, okay? What I particularly have spend my time is in this particular area here, which is known as the infrared, okay? And so the ways that most people have seen this is your remote control works as an infrared, so when you point it at the TV, there's actually an infrared light that comes out so the TV knows what you're going to do. A lot of our communications by telephone was done by fiber optic wires that go across, so this is what supports our internet and various other communications. And so this is where I have been working my career in terms of trying to make devices that operate in this particular wavelength. Okay. There's actually lots of cool things about these infrared lights. So what I'm showing here is Planck's backbody radiation that you might remember from physics, okay? And what's important here is the fact that this is the amount of light coming off, basically, as a function of wavelength. And these are the various colors, okay? And so what this means is that if I have some ability to be able to measure this, I can actually measure the temperature of various objects, okay? Because there's light coming out at particular wavelengths, right? And something that is really, really hot at 5,000 K, which might be the engine of a jet airplane, might be different than something that is actually really, really cold here, and I show 50 Kelvin as just an example. Okay. One of the real classic ways that this has been shown in time is how many people have seen this movie? The original. I want to make sure the original. Okay, that's a little bit more than I've seen. So if you really want to watch bad sci-fi movie, go pull this movie out. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger as the original Predator. Okay, and what's important here is that the alien predator, they say that it can see your fear, is what they say in the movie. And what that really means is that it can basically see the temperature coming off of your body. It shows up for the alien as different colors, and we can use that same idea. It just turns out that our eyes are not sensitive to that light. And so I make devices that are able to measure that light and then put it in such a way that it actually is sensitive to us. Okay, and so this is the area of what we refer to as night vision. Okay. Another important aspect of this is that this light is nice and that it can actually be transmitted through the atmosphere. And so what you're seeing here is this is basically the amount of light that gets transferred through the atmosphere as a function of wavelength. And so when if I'm a satellite and I want to send information back as we're exploring the skies, generally I want to pick one of these ranges because I want to be able to send all the information back without losing it due to the fact of the transmission, okay? And so actually some of the work that we've done is actually working with NASA to try to figure out how do we actually build better telescopes here on the ground so that when they send probes far, far deep into space that we can actually measure the images that they send back accurately, okay? The other really important aspect of this is to look at chemical sensing. Okay. And so if you remember from chemistry, the bonds that we have between various elements, they actually can vibrate. And when they vibrate at a particular wavelength or a particular energy of light. And these are just some examples of the ones that I have been interested in over my career and what they're important for. So for example, you'll notice that nitrous oxide is important that if we want to try to look at auto emissions and looking at pollution. And so you'll notice that all these are pretty much atmospheric, and that's something that's really important to me is are there ways for us to use this in some way of looking at the atmosphere? Okay. All right, so that kind of gives you the idea. So then the next stage is how did I become a vice provost? And what I will show you in a little while is that being a vice provost isn't exactly the same as being a faculty member. There is a distinctive difference, and it's what we refer to as the administration. Okay. So what I realized is the more time I spent on the faculty, I still really enjoy my research. I still do it. I still really enjoy being in the classroom. I'm teaching 47 first years this semester, and it's a lot of fun. But what I realized for me is that I was really intrigued by the issues of higher education, which I was exposed to on the committees in which I served. Okay? And so, as I mentioned, right, the faculty are involved in lots of committees that help run the university. Probably the most important one was one I was on in the University of Texas in probably about 2004 or so. The core curriculum is the same as the area requirements that you have in the college, okay? But what was different is that applied to the entire university. So it wasn't just for the College of Arts and Sciences. The engineers, the business students, the architects all had to have the same core requirements. It was 40 hours of courses out of a total degree of 120. And so there was a discussion about how should it actually be structured because it hadn't been looked at in 40 years. And so we had a committee, we went through a large area to talk about, what does this sort of education mean for the students going forward in a wide variety of different fields. And I think we made a lot of really good recommendations that they're implementing at the University of Texas. But this was one of the things that really got me interested in bigger pictures outside of my research and outside of my academic area, okay? The other thing that it did is it actually got me exposure to spend time with people in the administration, and I got a better sense of to understand what it is that they did, right? Probably even as a faculty member, I don't know that I really could have completely articulated what a provost did. I mean, I had a general sense of it, but I don't think I really knew what that was. But the idea of the time that I spent with them, especially in this project and some other things that I did on the service side, really exposed me to that idea and showed me a path that I might enjoy doing and taking, okay? So a little bit about the university's organization, okay? As you know, at least at the University of Virginia, we call the leader of our university the president. There are other schools, for example, the University of California calls it a chancellor, but it's basically the same position. I'm sure all of you know who that person is. This is our current president, Terry Sullivan. Turns out that Terry Sullivan and I were both on the faculty at the University of Texas at the same time. We had football seats just really close to each other. So it's a little side note before we both ended up here. It's kind of random, but it's kind of interesting when she became the faculty, the president here. And the job has really lots of requirements, right? So if you think about the complexity of our university, we have a health system, an entire medical school that the university helps to run, right? We have all the different schools in terms of the research that goes on, in terms of the academics. We have a thriving athletic program. There's just a wide lot of things. And in like organizations, generally this is too much for one single person to actually do, and so there needs to be delegation. And the way that it's structured here at the University of Virginia is that under the president are a series of vice presidents. It turns out we have 3 what are referred to as executive vice presidents in the university. I'm just going to list them alphabetically. So this is Pat Hogan. He came to the university from McKinsey, I think, or some consulting firm, and he is our executive president and chief operating officer. So you can think about that as he's more of the finance guy, okay? Second here is Rick Shannon. He's the vice president for health affairs. He came to us from the University of Pennsylvania. And so he's really involved, as you can tell, with health affairs in terms of the medical school, running the hospital, that sort of stuff. And then this is the provost. This is John Simon. He is a chemist. He came to us from Duke University. And he's the executive vice president and provost. And I'll talk a little bit about what he does, okay? Again, same issue. They have very large portfolios that they oversee. They can't really do it all to themselves, and so they have another level under them that helps manage that particular aspect of the job, okay? So let's talk a little bit about what the provost does, okay? So this is just a reading of what it actually says on the provost website. I don't want you to read all of that. I want you to focus on these 2 parts that I put in red, okay? So one of the really important things that the provost does is he oversees the education, research, and public service aspects of the university libraries, the museums, and those sort of things. And so he's really, if you will, at a lot of places they think of him as the chief academic officer. So all the stuff that we do in the academic side generally comes through the provost, okay? The other important task that the provost does is he's ultimately responsible for all of the recruitment, the hiring, retention, and stuff of the faculty that are in the classes. Now, of course, he designates that out because, again, it's a very big job, but ultimately all those decisions come to his office, and he ultimately is the one who makes those decisions, okay? So this is in the sphere in which I work, right? Is I'm taking some aspect of these parts of his portfolio, and I'm doing it, okay? I am not the only vice provost. There are actually, I think, 9 of us. I think I have listed them all here. What you will notice is we all have vice provosts for something. And so, for example, there's somebody for global affairs who's worried about aspects of the international part of what we do. There's one for the arts. So for example, you may have heard that Kevin Spacey is going to be here in October giving a speech. Jody is the one who was here to bring him here. And then we have one that is really designated on the faculty, okay? What's important to know about this is we all work together as a team, which is a lot of fun. We also come from a wide variety of different fields, okay? And so what I've noted here are those in the provost office who are still on the faculty. So these are people that are still teaching, still doing research and scholarship in their field and where they've all come from. And you notice we have a mix, right? There's 2 of us that are engineers, myself and Milton Adams. Carrie is the more recent vice provost. She's joining us from the law school. We have politics, art history. We have somebody from the medical school, right? So you'll notice that there's a wide variety of different things. And I hope what you get out of that is that your academic degree will not limit your career options, okay? You know, all of us are vice provosts, all of us are working in this field, and we got at it from really different paths, okay? Now, there's some of it that does. So a lot of what Carrie does is actually legal stuff, and I would be really bad at it, and so it's actually good that we have a lawyer actually doing that. But there's stuff that she does that also doesn't require a law degree, okay? And so it's kind of a mixed bag here, okay? All right, so are there any questions to this point? Okay, so in February of last year, the provost asked me to serve in this newly formed position of Vice Provost for Educational Innovation and Interdisciplinary Studies. It did not exist prior to the time that I took the position. So what I'm going to spend a little bit of time now is what do I do in a position, especially one that hasn't actually been done before. And there's pluses and minuses with that. The pluses is nobody knows what you're supposed to do, so you get to kind of choose what it is that you do and work on it, which is actually kind of fun. The downside of that is that people will have an idea of what they think that you're supposed to be doing, and it may not match what you actually want to do, and that's a lot of the challenge of the job. But let me tell you a little bit about how I'm thinking about this job, okay? And so one of the things that the provost has tasked me with is looking at the undergraduate educational experience writ large, okay, across the institution. And so when I think about this, I think about, well, if we're going to try to optimize or to make this experience as good as it can be for the students, what do we have to bring to the table? Okay, so one thing that we have to bring is the fact that we have a faculty and staff, and they have a wide variety of different interests and abilities. We bring in you as the students, and you have a lot of interest and capabilities about what it is that you can do. And then we have a curriculum that we as the faculty construct to help provide you some education. Okay? And so really the question always then becomes is, how do we align these various assets that we have in order to make your experience here, your 4 years, as good as it could possibly be? So what I'm going to show you on the next slide is just a typical way that this might work at a university, and it's really for illustrative purposes. So one way that it might look like is like this. Okay? And so you'll notice that there are some particular issues here that we probably should talk about, right? One is that there's a whole lot of things that the faculty are doing that aren't related to the students and aren't related to the curriculum. That's probably okay though, right? We are a research university at the end of the day. We need our faculty to go out and develop knowledge. So they're going to need some time and some space of which they're doing, which isn't really related to the teaching mission. Okay? But there are some other issues that we need to think about. Okay? One here is what I always call the curricular sweet spot. The faculty are interested in it. The students are interested in and are capable of doing what the faculty want, and we actually teach courses, and we allow it to count for degree plans and all sorts of other stuff, right? So that's the beautiful sweet spot we have. We have another really interesting area of stuff where the faculty and students are interested, but we don't have classes. That's not necessarily a problem, because what you're going to find here at the institution, there's a wide variety of co-curricular activities that you can do, so stuff outside of the class that can fit in, all right? But we have this other issue here, which is why would we have this scenario, right? Why would we have a whole bunch of things that students are interested in doing, which they can do, which aren't in the interest of the faculty, and we don't actually offer courses in this, okay? Now you could argue to some extent that this is where extracurriculars lie, and I agree with that to some extent, right? And so we have to think about what should this thing really look like, okay? And so from my view, a more realistic goal might be something that looks like this, okay? And I'm using exactly the same colors I did before. So red represents the faculty, yellow represents you as the students, and the blue, which you can barely see here, represents the curriculum, okay? And this is a little bit closer to what I think is more realistic, okay? We still need space for the faculty to do their research, but we basically really should be offering lots and lots of things that you are interested in and you have the capability of being able to do. I'm not going to say that we should get to 100%, but we should get pretty close. And more importantly, we shouldn't be offering courses that either the faculty are not interested in teaching or the students are not interested in taking, okay? So we hope that that little blue sliver should be really small, okay? I would love to tell you that it will be 0. It will never be 0, but, you know, that's the way it looks, right? And so what this allows is what my goal is, and what I've really said is my mandate, is how do we increase the engagement of you as students with our faculty, especially in areas in which they align, okay? And my particular interest is on students in their first 2 years. I know for me, having those experiences really good in the first 2 years will really change the decisions that you make going forward. In addition, the majors do a pretty good job of giving you these sorts of interactions once you've picked a major. And so the question is, how do we help in that assimilation process of deciding what are the different academic pursuits you would like to participate in? So let me talk to you a little bit of some of the ways that I'm doing this. One which I certainly engage you to participate in next year. And these all fall under the area of what we call high impact educational practices, okay? And so what these are sustained, so they usually last for some period of time. They're designed to be experimental interactions amongst faculty and students, okay? These have been shown to be amazingly beneficial on both sides. So for students, we found that they make academic performance better, they tend to persist better at the institution, happier and have more success. And what's really important, I think, for you, especially as we think about what's going to happen to you outside, is that it usually takes people to take the idea that they own their learning experience, and it's not something that the faculty provides to them. Okay? And there are also some faculty, there's actually some benefits to the faculty that are listed here. Now, there are multiple ways that we can go about doing this. This is some of the ones that have been shown to meet the criteria of being very successful, right? So undergraduate research is you are actually part of a learning committee, whether you recognize it or not. International studies, so studying abroad is a way to do this. And so these are wide different ways that we do this. It's this first one that I'm most interested in, right? Because if you think about it, as I said earlier, faculty are rewarded a lot based on their research and their scholarship, right? And so I think what's really important is how do we create opportunities for students to be more a part of that research and scholarship aspect of the faculty. Okay. So in the short term, what we've done in the Provost office is we've created a new program for students who have not had significant previous research experience, and we really are focusing on students who are rising second years and rising third years. Okay. It's called USOAR, which stands for Undergraduate Student Opportunities for Academic Research. Okay. This just gives you an idea of the projects that are going on right now, what sort of fields they are in. So one of my keys is to make sure that we have all of the fields covered. Okay, so I don't want it to be seen as just a science and engineering aspect. So for example, we have a young faculty member in the economics department who's interested in the economics of crime. We have people in Curry in the kinesiology that are looking at research related to sports medicine. So these are projects that you as first or second year students can get involved in, okay? We do these calls over the summer, so I want you to be aware of that. So sometime in the spring of 2015 or in the summer, you will hopefully hear about this project, and you can apply for one for the next academic year. We either pay you to participate in this, or you get it for course credit. It is your choice, so it is not. So it is basically a paid position, and you are paired with a faculty member for that entire academic year, working on a research project of mutual interest. Okay. So something that we're trying to expand. We have about 35 students this semester, but we had over 300 who wanted the experience. And so my challenge is then to try to find enough faculty to help provide that experience to as many students as possible. So that's what I'm going to be working on this year. Okay. There's a whole bunch of other activities that I'm involved in. You might have heard of this idea of total advising. This is something the president has talked a lot about. This is really, from my view of what it is that academic and career advising are generally seen as two entirely separate things, and they really are interrelated, right? So sometimes it is your academic, the things you learn academically will affect what it is that you might think about you do as your career, or in my case, vice versa. I took a different set of classes once I decided I was going to go to graduate school, okay? So it was my career aspirations that affected that. One of the other things I'm also is increasing evidence-based teaching and learning across grounds. Because we are a relatively big institution, we teach classes. So how many of you are taking like an intro biology or intro chemistry? Anybody? How many students do you have in your class?
150, 200.
Well, that's not actually too bad. Anyone have more than that? Oh, how many do you have?
400-ish.
Right, so we have 400 students in classes, right? We have classes that are 400. I took that class, and so Texas is probably a lot like parts of Virginia where there are towns that are really small. And I remember our instructor asking the question of how many people's hometown is smaller than the number of people in this class, and there were like 30 hands that went up, right? So I was in a class of 400 people, and people had come from towns that had less than 400 people in them, right? And so we have this, and so there's a whole bunch of ways that we know to teach an environment to make it better for students. And so one of my jobs is to try to figure out how do we get the faculty to adopt more of those practices. It's not just setting up there and speaking for 50 minutes. That's not the way that we know how to do it, okay? The role of technology and online education at UVA is going to be something I am looking at. So I'm sure you've heard about MOOCs or massively online courses. And so I'm kind of looking at that to some extent. What I'm actually more interested in is what is the role that technology can play in our residential experience to make it better. So I don't know if any of you have used clickers at this point in any of your classes. Yes. So that's one way to do it, but there's a whole bunch of other technologies we can bring into the classroom to make things better. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to think about. How do we do that a little bit better? Okay. And then another aspect, which is what I will end with, is looking at the idea of interdisciplinary research and education. Okay. What you're going to find, especially for you, is the problems that we want to solve are not confined to individual fields. So let's use climate change as as an example, okay? So a lot of people can think that climate change is a science problem, right? We're putting more carbon out into the atmosphere. We need to figure out a way to actually stop doing that, right? I agree that that's part of it. But there's a whole social aspect. There's a whole political aspect. How do we actually build structures in place so that people will do those things that will stop the idea of carbon going into the atmosphere? So what we're going to find is a lot of the issues are going to be very, very multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary. And we're trying to build our capacity to handle those sorts of problems here. One example of one that has come up in the last year or so is the Data Science Institute. You may hear about this. So you've heard the idea of big data. It's used a lot in companies. It's used a lot in, I guess, Facebook had their issues with using the data of their of people who use Facebook in terms of their looking at the emotions that they put into their news feeds. We're looking at it in a wider, bigger issue. Data involves actually every aspect of the university, right? So everything from medical records to actually looking at how do I understand the language use in 15th century England and what can that tell me about the history of that time. Okay, all of those need the tools of collecting huge amounts of data and bringing all that together, okay? And that's what this thing has, the Data Science Institute is doing. And so it's really looking at the interdisciplinary field of data science. So what a lot of schools have done is they say, we're going to put this into business, or we're going to put this into engineering, and that's where we're going to look at university. We've decided to make it a pan-university effort and look at it from all aspects. And what we believe, of course, is that if we provide this leverage of all the schools and all the different capacities we have at the university, we'll do a lot better in this data science area. Okay? This is the director of the data science, one of my colleagues over in the engineering school. This is Don Brown. He's in systems and information engineering. And the plan is hopefully over the next 5 years, we'll have a couple, 2 or 3 more of these institutes in a wide variety of different areas. Okay? And the reason I tell you about this is, this is one area where you can get lots of experience looking at the intersection of wide variety of different fields. And so, I think one of the things I would leave you with, and I'll stop to answer questions at this point if you have any, is you don't have to think about your world as all in one field, right? Things are combining together, things are going to work together in order for you to be able to find the things that are going to be of interest to you. Pursue all the interests that you have and enjoy yourself here on grounds. So thank you very, very much for your attention. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have at this point.
We should give you a round of applause.
Oh. So are there any questions about anything? Even something I didn't talk about? Yes, ma'am.
That program that you talked about, that can be part of work study, right?
That is correct. So you're talking about the USOR program?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the USOR program, so if you were work study, yes, we do. That can be your work study assignment.
Are there any architecture faculty doing that?
We are working on getting the architecture faculty to do it. So that is my job. So my job is to make sure that every school is represented. I mean, your principal and I have even talked about how do we get Darden involved, even though they do not have undergraduates. Even though they don't have undergraduates. I know, but you don't have undergraduates out there taking classes. But they do research out there that would be of interest to undergraduates. I've even talked to the law school, and I think the law school is a little less interested at this point, but I will work on them. I will get them interested. Great question. Any other questions? We're good? Okay. Well, thank you again very much for your attention.
Well, wait.
Oh, wait, there's more?
Yes, there is more. We have to present you with a small token of our appreciation, something we hope you will cherish and put in a place of honor on your desk
Okay.
in the Vice Provost's office.
Excellent.
Which I assume there is a Vice Provost's office.
Yes. So if you ever want to find where my office is, I'm in Booker Hall. Okay. So where is Booker Hall? Well, actually, maybe I should say where in the world. Yeah, maybe I should make you find it. But if you're at the Rotunda and you go on not the lawn side of Rotunda, you go on the other side of Rotunda across University Avenue. There's a big building, which is Madison Hall, which is where the president and our provost is. And then there's a little bitty tiny building next to it across the street, and that's Booker House, and that's where I am.
Do they have to crawl over fences?
No, they don't have to go. We don't have to go. It's right next to an Episcopal church. So if you're walking down the corner, there's an Episcopal church by there's a Bank of America, I guess, there. So there's a building there that's Booker House, and that's where my office is.
With the renovation of Rotunda, we've just heard comments, of course you all are experiencing this. how they just corridored off the whole thing. They made it the most unfriendly place where it used to be the most friendly place.
It's a little bit of a challenge. I
We have to
agree with
negotiate,
that.
exactly.
But we're on the other side of that. You can't actually, well, you can see a big fence. I'm not gonna lie to you. You can see a big fence if you're looking at it.
Excellent. Well, maybe some of them will end up in your office at some
That's
point.
fine.
I'm sure you'll be more than happy to talk with them.
More
So
than
use Archie. He is here. The whole point of Backstage is for us to be able to do this for you early in your career so that you know who your go-to people are. You get interested in these topics. You're excited about some of this. If he's stimulated you in a certain way, he's pushed a button and you want to get more information about that, you want more buttons pushed, go over and see him. Thank you, Archie.
Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause. Excellent.